intimating that because the palace had kept her in a box.
Which was curious because they left 5 years ago. So there has been 5 years. Hello and welcome to The Royals with me, Roya Nikar, Royal Editor for the Sunday Times.
And me, Kate Mancy, Royal Editor for the Times.
And big news, American Riviera Orchard is now, as ever...
Yes, a new name for Meghan's lifestyle brand. A big announcement.
Well, it's definitely got social media and the media talking, and us.
Also, you heard it first on this podcast a couple of weeks ago when we said that the Waleses should have their own exhibition.
Now, we're not saying they may have listened to us, although we hope they do, but the Princess of Wales and her children have definitely delivered more art since then.
We'll do a guessing game of who drew which one.
But first, the King has thanked what was called Britain's unwavering support for Ukraine.
A lot is happening between the USA and Russia about Ukraine. With the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of the country fast approaching, the King has visited Imperial College London's Centre for Injury Studies, where he met soldiers who've been wounded in previous conflicts, including Afghanistan and Iraq.
During his visit, he also did a video call with a Ukrainian soldier. Dr. Nat Herrick expressed his deepest gratitude for the United Kingdom's unwavering support for Ukraine. And he said, "The commitment of Your Majesty and the British people has been invaluable to us, and we hope for Europe's support in these critical times."
To which the King replied, "Thank you very much indeed." So what does this mean in the context of it all? We've had Trump escalating on social media. He's called the Ukraine president a dictator. He said that that essentially that Ukraine started the war and that he should have done a deal by now to bring it to an end. He's saying that he's got low opinion poll rating, but Times Radio has proved that's not the case, that actually Zelensky still is very popular in his country. And in walks the King, which is a really interesting engagement.
Timely. Very
timely. And he met soldiers looking at how lessons could be learned from previous conflicts and how they're now being deployed for people who've lost limbs or been injured in any other way from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and how that rehabilitation is carrying on with this centre called Unbroken, which was established in Lviv in the country. So it's interesting that Charles is now in the centre of this. We've been talking about how he's been a bridge between UK government and Trump in the past. But what does this mean politically?
Well, I thought the engagement was obviously it would have been planned a long time in advance before everything whipped up in the last 40 hours with Trump and Zelensky and Russia and Putin and Starmer trying to figure out, what on earth he's going to say and do when he goes to Washington next week. But what was quite interesting was I was reading around some of the reaction to this engagement, and there were some royal watchers who thought it was a slightly more guarded interaction from the King than previously. I don't know. I think he's previously spoken about the unprovoked aggression by Russia in Ukraine, and he's given speeches where he said, "I hope, our freedoms will prevail." It was a little bit more tempered yesterday. I suppose maybe that was in keeping with the nature of the engagement. But it does, as we've talked about before, it does make things a little bit more, not complicated, but a little bit more sensitive in terms of the King acts on the advice of the government. The government at the moment is trying to find its way as to, Starmer came out and absolutely, bang behind Zelensky last night, saying, he's an elected leader, we support him. But we know that we are, at the moment, trying to maintain the best possible relationship with Donald Trump, not just Keir Starmer. We've talked about, the royal soft power there and the letters between the King and William. So it is all wrapped up in quite a kind of politically sensitive, complicated, softly, what next kind of way.
And that engagement would only have taken place with the government's approval and their blessing, if you like. So it is political.
Yeah.
That video call that the King made into Ukraine, and somebody from Ukraine thanking His Majesty the King for Britain's unwavering support.
Yeah, when Trump has just said...
that's a very, very strong kind of image, isn't it?
It is, when Trump is sending people to Saudi Arabia to sit down with the Russians and broker a peace deal that Ukraine's not even involved in.
Yeah, Ukraine not at the table at all.
Yeah, really interesting. So I think what'll be interesting to see is how many more engagements other members of the royal family do around Ukraine, because we saw the outbreak of war nearly 3 years ago, I mean, William and Kate were very quick to put out a message on what was then Twitter. The King, the Queen, the Waleses have all done engagements around the Ukrainian community here and refugees. So what will be interesting to see is whether that develops over the months ahead as we navigate our way with America and this peace deal or whatever.
And even, I mean, the King's been pushing for that as well. So even in Poland, when he went for Auschwitz, there was a Ukraine contingent. He was looking at how that Polish centre in Krakow was managing Ukraine refugees, how they were supporting Ukraine. And I think that, you know, there's lots of sensitivity around it, for obvious reasons, but how the royals will be deployed to smooth over that relationship, perhaps with Trump, will be really interesting to see.
Watch this space.
Now, the Duchess of Sussex has dropped a new video on her Instagram, the platform she rejoined at the beginning of the year. But this time, it was to announce her lifestyle brand, previously known as American Riviera Orchard. It now has a new name.
As ever.
As ever.
That's the brand new name with a brand new logo, Kate.
Is it brand new?
Well, I was going to say, it hasn't
Looks
gone
familiar to some people.
Hasn't gone entirely smoothly, has it? It looks familiar, as you say, to some people. It looked very familiar when it dropped to the mayoress of the Mallorcan town, Porreres.
Nice.
And she has claimed the logo of a palm tree with two birds either side of it is, she says, an exact copy of the town's historic coat of arms.
No.
Yes. Now, it's not just her. Also, the founder of the American vintage clothing label, which is called As Ever NYC, said he was exploring all options after receiving an outpouring of support and concern regarding recent events around our namesake brand. And the announcement comes just weeks ahead of the launch of Meghan's new Netflix series called With Love, Meghan, which we've spoken about previously on the podcast. She also had another announcement, and this one was pretty significant because she said Netflix will be her business partner in As Ever.
It was an interesting way of announcing the news, wasn't it, Roya? She posted a video which begins with a voice saying it's recording, and we don't see that person, but we can hear that it's obviously Prince Harry.
It's recording.
Okay. Cat's out of the bag. I'm shocked we've kept this a secret for so long. In 2 weeks, my show is coming out, which I'm so excited for. And also my business, which I think there's been a lot of curiosity about. Last year, I had thought, you know what, American Riviera, that sounds like such a great name. It's my neighborhood. It's a nickname for Santa Barbara. But it limited me to things that were just manufactured and grown in this area. Then Netflix came on, not just as my partner in the show, but as my partner in my business, which was huge. So I thought about it. And I've been waiting for a moment to share a name that I had secured in 2022. And this is the moment. And it's called As Ever. As Ever essentially means as it's always been. And if you followed me since 2014 with the TIG, you know I've always loved cooking and crafting and gardening. This is what I do. And I haven't been able to share it with you in the same way for the past few years, but now I can. So as things are starting to trickle out there, I wanted you to hear it from me first. Of course, there will be fruit preserves. I think we're all clear at this point that jam is my jam. But there's so many more products that I just love that I use in my home. And now it's time to share it with you. So I can't wait for you to see it. Thanks, guys.
Out of shot.
Out of shot. Yes. But I didn't understand why he was saying it's recording and
She
then
was
it's clearly
holding it.
like a sort of selfie video.
It was curious. I noticed that too. And then she did the recording sitting in her garden looking very casual chic. And as part of the announcement, she also shared a rare photograph of her and their daughter, Princess Lilibet, wafting together in a garden with the words As Ever across the image. Apparently the As Ever is in Meghan's own very famous now calligraphy. So what do we make of the rebrand, Kate?
Well, there's already been quite a lot of controversy, hasn't there? Like you say, about the Mallorcan coat of arms, and there's this other company, but another company has come out as well today to say, hang on, that's my name as well. It's a Arizona company, and it's a photography brand. So
it's curious to me, but given that there was such a U-turn because she had issues with getting American Riviera Orchard trademarked, although that wasn't the reason she gave, was it? She said that it was actually all her own idea and it sort of restricted her.
It was too restrictive,
Yeah.
American Riviera Orchard, she said, didn't she? That was the reason why she'd changed the name. It wasn't the fact that it ran into trademark difficulties.
No, and also there was quite an interesting line in her video message where she said, I haven't been able to share this kind of stuff with you for the last 5 years, but now I can.
Intimating that because the palace had kept her in a box.
Which was curious because they left 5 years ago. So there has been 5 years. Anyway, we'll gloss over that. I'm interested, I'm just curious that no one clocked that there were other companies with similar names or very similar logos. And it just feels like, do you think there will always be controversy around anything Meghan launches, and actually is that good for the brand and good for Netflix and good for interest?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think if nobody cared, nobody was talking about it, that would be far worse for her. But surely if she's going, it's interesting that she's going into business, she said, with Netflix, because that wasn't the understanding I got from when she launched American Riviera Orchard. When we were there together when that first dropped on her Instagram, which was on the night of the Princess Diana Awards. Prince William was just about to take to the stage, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then everyone's phones start buzzing. And she had dropped, that Instagram. Now she's changed the name. I mean, she says jam is her jam. So
jam
it's going to be...
Is jam your jam?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think we'll get some jam?
No. I think we are off the jam. I think we are off the jam list.
Shame.
But there'll be other products. I think it'll probably do very well. I mean, I wonder how well these kind of selfie videos do. There was the one with Billie Eilish, about the Billie Eilish merch that she had got for somebody who'd lost their favourite Billie Eilish concert T-shirt in the LA fires, and she had managed to pull in some sort of freebies, and including a lunchbox, which she didn't really know what that was apparently, and she did that kind of selfie video. I mean, it's obviously a kind of a style of hers. She does the kind of little giggle and the laugh and the sort of conspiratorial whisper, like she's bringing you into her confidence. And it'll be really interesting to see if that style, if it works.
Is in the series. I wonder how much of that is in the series. Is that in the series?
It's the kind of whisper beckoning to a friend, isn't it? But it seems, because she's done it so much now, it seems like it's quite contrived, and that's and she's an actress, she knows what works and she does it really well, but will people buy into it if it's not authentic?
Well, I'm just curious to know, is Meghan is her lifestyle appealing enough to enough people to want to buy things to do with gardening, cooking? Who it's an open-ended question. Who will buy that stuff? Because you've got Gwyneth Paltrow and she's in the kind of luxe home entertaining kind of business, isn't she, with Goop? You've got Martha Stewart, who's the sort of cooking homeware queen.
Yeah.
Where will Meghan fit in? I'm so interested to sort of see that in terms of the business and the merchandise. Like, I think loads of people will tune in to watch the series because people are curious to see at home or at a borrowed home with Meghan. But I'm intrigued
will they be clicking on Shopify, which seems to be behind the website that she set up, to click through to buy the stuff?
Hilary Rose had something very good this week in the Times. Did you see? It said, was it click HRH for the discount code? The other thing that was interesting about that little selfie video was she said, I'm so excited to share, my concept and my business and the stuff I'm going to sell with you, because I haven't been able to do that for the last few years, which raised a few eyebrows from a few sort of royal watchers and a few people, because actually Harry and Meghan left the UK, they left royal duties, didn't they, for what they said was they wanted to come out a different kind of role 5 years ago now.
And also, she did produce a cookbook while she was in the palace.
That's right, for the
Duchess of Sussex.
For the hub at Grenfell.
Yeah, for the Grenfell Tower and, the terrible fire that happened there. And she did this cookbook and released a cookbook. So
it did very well.
It did very well, and it was for charity, and it was all about recipes and talking to people, and, that very much felt like her jam, and she was able to do that at the palace. And
people pointed out as well that obviously Charles sells lots of his own produce through Highgrove and Highgrove shops and Dutch Organics and all of that.
Yeah, produces his own watercolours, which go up for sale as well.
Yeah, interesting. Recollections may vary.
May vary, but I think interest is huge.
It will be. And not long to wait now. 2 more weeks until that series drops. Anyway, it all seems very well timed, because it was only last week that Harry closed the Invictus Games in Canada. And he ended his speech with, "Bring on Invictus Games Birmingham 2027. You have permission to party."
Party. We've known for a while that the Invictus Games come into the UK in a couple of years' time. Prince Harry will obviously want to be here for that. But the question is, will Meghan join him? We haven't exactly seen much of the Duchess in Britain since their move to America. And there's also the question, will the rest of the royal family join him?
Well, a lot could happen between now and 2 years. A lot has happened in the last 2 years.
A lot's happened in the last year.
I know. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, when I was talking to a friend of the King's around the time of Harry's 40th and musing on Birmingham in 2027, that friend of the King's felt that, he thought the King probably would want to go and wouldn't want to be churlish about it and would want to show his support for Harry when he's here. But, it really depends on how the family dynamic plays out over the next couple of years. I think it's as things stand now, it's unlikely you'd get other members of the royal family. You will get his family there. The Spencers, I'm sure, will be out in force, as they were when he came back in May for the 10th anniversary service at St. Paul's. But it just is another thing that's going to bring into stark sort of reality. If Harry's here in 2027, as he surely will be, showing support for the veterans, particularly in his his homeland, if no other members of the royal family go to show their support, particularly the King as head of the armed forces, all of that, that will be.
Well, it's
sad.
interesting today was this week when they had the Ukraine engagement we just talked about with the King, because he met a double amputee and he lost both his legs in 2011 when he was serving in Afghanistan for the British Army. He then went on to take part in the inaugural Invictus Games in 2014, and he was talking about that to the King. Now, that could have been an opportunity for the King to say, oh, yes, they're marvellous, or, whatever that might be. But he just let that comment go and the conversation continued and the King didn't pick up on that at all. So I thought that was really interesting, that was an opportunity for the King to acknowledge Invictus Games with somebody who was front and centre of it when it first started and has, been a kind of pin-up for rehabilitation and just sort of getting up and getting on with his life and doing incredible things despite having life-threatening, life-altering injuries. So I thought that was quite telling. The King just sort of, didn't acknowledge the games at all.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I suppose it depends, as we say, what happens with the family dynamics. It also depends, I suppose, on what happens with the whole issue around Harry's security. I mean, Harry will be here regardless. Would Meghan come, do you think, to the UK to support Harry for the Invictus Games?
We haven't seen her here much at all. We understand that she came when they went over to Africa. She was
in transit, wasn't she?
She was at Heathrow Airport, and I don't understand she'd left the airport at all. He picked him up en route.
Well, he said, he's currently due to have another round with the Home Office, isn't he, in April, over his security when he's here. He says he doesn't feel it's safe to bring Meghan and his family here until that's resolved, unless his security is restored to the level it was before. If that doesn't happen, and obviously he's it hasn't gone so well for him so far. I mean, he's won permission to appeal. Would that be a valid reason for Meghan not to come and support him here? I mean, she's we've just seen her in Canada for the Winter Games. Mm-hmm. He'd probably love to have her here at his home games.
But the Home Office deal is that it's assessed on a case-by-case basis. So it's not a kind of he never gets state protection. So there's a very good chance that he would get full state protection when he came over for the Invictus Games, given the subject matter, given that he's a former serving soldier who did 2 tours himself in Afghanistan, given the high profile of the event at such a major public event. I wouldn't see any reason why the Home Office on that occasion would deny him security, but it's up to them, I suppose. But it's not a catch-all, you're never getting it, which is sometimes how people portray it.
Well, Harry says, get ready to party, prepare to party, permission to party.
You ready to party?
I'm ready to party.
Got a year to get ready.
I just wonder whether other members of the royal family will be ready to party, but we'll see come 2027.
Coming up, Roya and I play a guessing game of who drew it after the Princess of Wales released new portraits drawn by her and her children.
Now, a couple of weeks ago on this podcast, we spoke about the many artistic talents of the royal family. There was Prince Louis taking his very first royal portrait on Kate's camera phone. Sorry, I'll do that again. Now, a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, we spoke about the many artistic talents of the royal family. There was Prince Louis taking his very first royal portrait on Kate's phone, the King and his watercolours,
Kate and her patronage of the various art galleries, and Prince George has always had a flair for a sketch.
The list is long, and we did say in that episode that if we could get an exhibition of George, Charlotte and Louis, lo and behold, because this week the Princess of Wales and her children, George, Charlotte and Louis, have revealed their artistic skills in 4 portraits of each other.
I'm telling you, they're listening to us.
They definitely are. They definitely are. Royal warrant. So should we try and have a go at who's done which portrait? Because the palace were very secretive on this.
I wondered what word you were going to choose then. The palace were
There were a few reporters who asked, could you possibly tell us who drew which? And the palace response was, no, that's part of the fun. It's for people out there to have a guess and get kids, active. We're not going to tell you who drew who, but it was quite obvious when you just looked at them. Well, we think it was anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So
the first one. The first image in red shows a figure with long hair and a shirt collar, as does the second, which features more colours. There's a kind of a green collar, kind of some sort of great yellow eyeshadow and sort of blue and purple and green hair, a bit curly.
The third is a portrait of a long-haired person, which we assume to be the princess, sitting, looking very poised in an armchair.
And the final one looks to be charcoal portrait or chalk of a young boy, possibly Prince Louis, with his eyes closed. Probably because eyes are so hard to draw. It's easier to draw them with their eyes closed, maybe. Either that or it was the only moment she could get him to stay still because he was sleeping.
I'd say...
So who is who? Go on then, give us your...
I'd say that red one, Kate, is quite abstract. I'd say it shows a certain amount of flair and flourish. It's quite abstract. To me, that first red one screams Prince Louis. I think that's got Prince Louis's hand all over it.
Defo. Yeah, I would agree with you. The second one, I would probably say is Princess Charlotte of her mother. But that's very good for a 9-year-old.
I think that's
really, I think that shows some serious talent.
Quite abstract, but kind of...
slightly Picasso-esque.
Good. You're absolutely right. The nose and mouth are quite Picasso-esque and interesting and a sort of flourish use of colour.
Bring your kind of former art correspondence experience to bear on this.
It reminds me of some of the faces on some of Picasso's ceramics. There you go, Princess Charlotte. We're getting technical now.
The one we assume that Prince George has done of his mother, the kind of line drawing of her in a chair is very nice.
It's elegant, that, isn't it?
Very elegant.
It's quite controlled and studied. And then the final one looks like someone who is quite an accomplished sketcher. And we know that Kate is quite artistic and she did an art history degree, didn't she? And it's great. It's also grown up. I'm not saying that the kids couldn't have done it, but I'd be surprised.
But on the basis of this, I'd like to see more of Kate's artwork because that is seriously good, I think.
Well, as we know from getting these pictures, Kate, that she is listening to our podcast. There you go.
Your Royal Highness, the country demands it.
We'd love to, and so does this podcast. We'd like to see more.
Well, maybe these will be displayed in the National Portrait Gallery, of which she is patron. So who knows?
I was there just yesterday, actually, walking through the Tudor Gallery and looking through lots of real portraits. And I think these would make a wonderful addition.
Indeed. Well, my 6-year-old drew a picture of me, which I shared on Instagram, which was more flattering than my the picture of me in real life. I drew one of her, which was really shocking, which I didn't.
You did not share. I noticed that you did not share your artistic flourish.
The whole point of this, of course, is to get people to draw, family members to draw each other, to have a kind of a moment of connection. And actually, when you're sitting there kind of looking at somebody, it is nice, and it's a good thing to do, and put the screens away and have that kind of moment of reflection, which of course they're doing now on their holidays, which we might get on to. Now, listeners of this podcast will remember that last week we talked about William skipping the BAFTA red carpet this year. He didn't go to the awards ceremony, and that maybe he was going to spend Sunday night with his kids instead. Well, he did appear to do that, but the setting was perhaps even more glamorous than being out on the red carpet.
Instead of getting glammed up and stepping out with the A-list stars, they jetted off to the luxurious Caribbean vacation destination of Mustique with their kids Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. You can't really blame them though, can you?
No. It's very
Looking
nice.
out the window.
It's very nice there, I gather. I haven't been invited yet. They were also joined by Kate's mother, Carol Middleton, on the island, which was a favourite destination, of course, for the late Princess Margaret.
Yes, it was. Oh, well, maybe they're celebrating belatedly Carol's 70th birthday for a love-in on Mustique. Yes, Margaret visited Mustique for her honeymoon in 1960, and she also had a house there. And the late Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were also frequent visitors.
Maybe that's when they found the time to do their sketches of each other when they're on their holiday.
Maybe we'll see some watercolours of a Mustique sunset by Prince Louis.
Oh, nice.
That could go in an NPG, couldn't it?
Yes.
Do you think we should sketch each other?
Yeah, I think you'd do a better job than me.
No, I'm rubbish at art.
Oh, really?
I was always really bad at school at art. Yeah, I couldn't even draw horses. Imagine that.
Oh, dear. That was the only thing I could draw.
I would sketch you if I could be allowed to be abstract rather than figurative.
Oh, dear. Maybe not then.
Maybe not. Now, before we go, last week, listeners, you might remember we were talking about Charles's visit to Tottenham Hotspur, which was quite fun. And I was reaching in the air and couldn't quite find. I was like, I'm sure. And we know that William supports Villa. He's obsessed with Villa, Aston Villa. I'm sure that the King supports a slightly less famous club, but I couldn't quite remember what it was, and I was thinking out loud on the podcast. Is he an Aston Villa fan too?
I don't think he's a massive football fan, is he?
He wants... I've got to try and remember this. Hang on. He did say he supported a football club once, and it was quite random. Now, after that podcast last week, a friend of the King's, who was, I'm delighted to say, was listening to our podcast, messaged me to say, it was Burnley FC. Burnley.
Burnley, of course.
So thank you for that, friend of the King. And I then had to sort of remind myself why the King is a claret fan, is a claret, I should say is the terminology, because he did confirm in 2012, during a reception at Windsor Castle, that he is a bona fide Burnley fan. And this is what he said. A consortium of my charities, including the British Asian Trust, has been working in Burnley. Hence, some of you asked this evening whether I support a British football club, and I said, yes, Burnley.
Not known for his kind of football bants, is he, the King?
Not really. Except he did do quite a good bants message after, didn't he, for the England team last year when they had all those sort of hair-raising matches that got them to the...
Now he's mates with David Beckham, of course, who's an ambassador for his foundation.
Always at his side these days.
Never far away.
Anyway, it was Burnley, and I was delighted. We're delighted to know.
Thank you for clearing that one up, friend of the King, because it's good to know. I mean, we don't often see him down Burnley.
You've had a good idea though for the King and Burnley, haven't you, Kate? Why don't you share it?
What was that? I don't know.
You know, Wrexham, Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, yes. Well, why doesn't the Duchy, or maybe William could do this, the Duchy could buy...
Maybe the Duchy of Lancaster.
The Duchy of Lancaster from the King could buy Burnley.
How do you think
and
Burnley
do a
would...
kind of Welcome to Wrexham style
revamp
TV show around it. The King kind of comes in as a sort of slightly clueless, benevolent...
benevolent.
Ryan Reynolds figure. Less Deadpool, more kind of You're Madge. You know, I'd be up for that.
Okay.
This could be a kind of a twist on his Amazon TV show.
Yeah, maybe it could be included.
Let's just do it.
Okay.
I'm pitching that to
Shall
Netflix.
we run it by Burnley first? And the Palace. On that note, Kate, on that footballing, artistic, sketchy note, look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah. Bye, Roya.
Bye, Kate.